Welcome to Season 2 of Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories. Join hosts Nicola and Gina as they tackle workplace toxicity head-on. Real-life stories, well-being, and standing against toxicity await you. Let's break up with toxic workplaces and create a revolution of positivity together.
As a disclaimer, Nicola and Gina's opinions are solely their own and don't represent professional advice. It's just their perspective, so form your own conclusions. Heads up, this podcast may contain adult content and explicit language. So let's dive in and break up with toxic workplaces.
Well, let's get cracking. Jay, welcome. Would you like to tell us where you're from, who you are, and kind of what industry you work in?
Yeah, so my name's Jay White. So originally from Ireland and kind of now living in New Zealand. And over my course of my career, which still seems weird to say the word career because it sounds like something my dad would say, I've lived and worked in like 9 different countries and a couple of different industries. So I actually started off as an electrician and now I'm like head of digital. So I've had my last 10 or 12 years have been in product management, digital, leading teams in the software space.
Awesome. What kind of got you into that? Like how did your career develop?
How did my career develop? So how I came from being an electrician, so I was like a high voltage electrician, which is a really specialized thing. So we would take 6-month contracts at power stations, and I specialized in conversions. So taking old coal, fossil fuel power stations and making them renewable. But then you just ended up in 6-month, 9-month contracts and you were like floating around to different spaces. And then you never got to settle anywhere because you would come in and you were brought in by Siemens and you were paid a bit more than the people that were already there. So there was already this like disparity there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met my current wife and I just got sick of my next job was going to be in the butt F of nowhere in Canada. And I was like, I'm not moving here. I'm not doing this again. Because when you go like, I've lived in here and I've lived here, everyone thinks it's like glamorous, but actually there's no power stations in metropolitan areas. You know, if you go work in one in Adelaide, for example, you're nowhere near any town. You're living in, it's pretty much a fly in, fly out piece. And you just get sick of that after a while. And that does breed a real us versus them toxic mentality if you ever want to see that.
I love that you called her your current wife. Was there plan for wife number 2?
No, but I'm her second, so she may be the one that
She might have the plan, Nicola.
I'm not saying I have the power in this. She's the one with the history of upselling and upcycling. So
That your job, this is so obscure, but there was like a French series, and I think it was called The Wall. And it described exactly in my mind what you were describing, because it was like they were in this like really remote part of Canada or Quebec. And it was just like all of the buildings that, were doing, they weren't doing like what we were doing. They were doing something else, but it was just very remote and everything existed just for the workers. But like you could only come in by bus or come in by plane, and everything was contained to that little area. It was like you would get shipments in and that's it. And it was like you were cut off from most of civilization.
yeah, very similar. So I worked in one in Wales and we lived in shipping containers that were fitted.
Yeah.
And it just creates this weird dynamic of if you're not in with the project manager or the site supervisor, your life's not going to be really good. Like you're gonna be the one in the trenches pulling the cables while the favorites are kind of doing the nicer jobs.
Got it.
That
sounds terrible.
You don't realize it when you're in it, which is the interesting thing.
You never do, right, Nicola? Whenever you're in a toxic environment, it's like we've talked about various experiments like where you're just swimming to stay afloat and you don't realize how hard you're working, stuff like that. I think that's common with a lot of people who experience like toxic workplaces and burnout and stuff. You don't realize how bad it is till you're out of it.
Yeah. until you've actually removed yourself out of it. Or if it's so toxic or so blatantly toxic, like when we spoke to Kier about the microaggressions, right? Sometimes they're really obvious and you have to call someone in to come and kind of sort it out. But I think that gets to that's a whole different kettle of toxic.
I think the one that stuck out to me the most was when my 4-year-old begged me not to go to work anymore because
Why?
I didn't play with her anymore when I got home. Because of where I was working, it was first of all, everyone had to be in the office. It was that weird thing of if I don't see you, you're
not productive.
Really weird because you don't need to watch me do a PowerPoint presentation, or a lot of product roles in particular. A lot of it's thinking, so there's no actual output. And it's are you more creative walking along the waterfront, or are you going to be more creative if someone puts you in the box and says, you better think of the next thing right now?
Yeah.
So it's kind of an eye-opening when you've got a 4-year-old telling you not to
go to work.
Like,
so that kind of segues really nicely. So, we started a conversation around your previous toxic workplace that you had come from. So I'm kind of curious to know, what were some of the how did you get into that job in the first place? We won't say where it was as usual. But I'm curious to know how you got into the role, and were there any red flags in the recruitment process, or did you see any red flags right up front, or did the red flags come later when you were embedded and then all of a sudden you were like, surprise, red flags everywhere?
No, I think I ignored a lot of them throughout the
Right,
process.
but looking back, do you see them now, and can you share what they are now if you remember them?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So when I came out of, I did 3 interview stages, and I came out of 2 of them going well, I obviously haven't got this job because for the first one, the person interviewed me, I didn't speak. So it was a half an hour interview where I probably spoke for 3 minutes of the interview, where they just told me all about how great they were and how great the culture was. So I just came out of that going okay, they've obviously just filled the time, and we'll just move on with our lives because it doesn't matter. Then it went to the next stage and the next stage, and it was I think one of the 2 big red flags now I always look for is if you're gonna work for someone, ask them what their hobbies are outside of work, and if they don't have any, run. Just run. If they're
That's a good point.
Because they're just going to be on their phone the whole time. All they care about.
All they do is work. Right.
Or they're not going to understand that you will have a hobby and why that's important to you.
Or
so
just
that's
life balance, period, right? Because if they're probably working the whole time, and even though, Nicola, we've talked about this before, even though it's not written, they still, if they're your supervisor, they're still going to expect you to respond to them.
Yeah.
Even if it's outside of working hours, which is so messed up. I also, don't you think the red flag was that second interview where they just talked about themselves and how, if somebody is saying how great they are at something and you actually put them to the task over and over, I always find 99% of the time they're not that great at it. So if somebody's talking about how great their company culture is, I would say 99% of that time, it's garbage.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because the other second big red flag to me is when I probably interviewed 5 or 6 people that all had the exact same answer about the culture. But what was really weird when I look back at it now is I never once asked about it. So they forced it into the conversation. It's quite funny when you think back of it now, when you're what does the day-to-day of this role look like? And then someone starts parroting off an answer about the team culture and how we work, and you're okay, I didn't ask that. And it's weird that you had the same answer as 3 other people, and it's
that is really weird
thing.
So when you got into obviously you got the job after 500 interviews later.
Parroted interviews later.
Nothing about you. Amazed you got the job.
We don't care about you.
Yeah, we
Also, our
don't care about
company,
you at
we
all.
don't give a shit about you. Just know that the company culture is amazing. You're gonna love it and you're gonna die loving it. That's really what they were saying. We're gonna fucking die here.
Yeah, and in my final interview, one of the panelists was in their car, the whole way through it, and it's like cool. And so I genuinely thought they had a preferred candidate, and like I was the one that they were dragging along to say that they interviewed.
There's a kind of freedom in that though, isn't there, Jay? Because you're like, fuck it. I'm just doing it to do it. It's good. And like, if you don't think you're the preferred candidate, you just kind of show up and be who you are. So there is
Yeah,
a
and
freedom
that's
in that.
kind of what I say to people that I mentor. It's like if you want to look for a new job, interview at a few places that you don't really care about first to get that
Mhm.
rustiness out. So like your first interview isn't the one you really want. So I kind of treated it like that. And I
Which
guess
is
like
probably to your benefit, which
Benefit.
is probably one of the reasons why you got the job, because you were probably just so
Eh,
like low
yeah.
key, you know?
But what I kind of learned afterwards is that I feel like they didn't necessarily want someone that was that experienced because they were very controlling. So the fact that I was probably a bit more like, oh yeah, sure, whatever, probably like played into it. And then when I got in and tried to do my role, it like
Right.
wasn't. Um, so it was
So,
quite laughable.
so when you got into the role and they were quite control, tell us a little. Let's deep dive into the control
I
here.
love Nicola.
Let's deep
Nicola
dive.
has like her catchphrases, circle back, deep dive, gorgeous.
Wow, I love it for you that you are such an asshole. I love this for you. Thank you.
I love you, Nicola, and I love your catchphrases.
I love you too.
I have
So,
catchphrases as well. Okay.
oh,
But so
you do.
here's the thing. Yes, I know. So here's the thing. Nicola was gonna say, go ahead.
What I was going to say was, all right, you get into the organization. Tell us a little bit about the not anything identifiable ofs, but like what did they do? What were they doing?
Well, it was weird because it was, I would say, day 2 or 3, I was told, here's 2 people on your team you need to get rid of. So I hadn't even completed my like onboarding process. And
Just
then
get
they,
rid of them.
yeah, manage them
Oh,
out.
do it in New Zealand.
Uh, I mean, you can if
Well,
you can do it wherever
especially
you want to. You just have to do it in a legal way.
were they contract were you a contractor or were you a
No, so
full
full
okay.
time, and I think like Nicola, you can attest to this as well. Is like the way the one of the benefits. I've worked for a couple of American companies, and one of the benefits of I guess at will employment is like there's a lot less games if someone wants to get rid of you. You can actually just say, "Here's your
Bye.
notice, pay bye."
Yeah,
Like in
and
New
they're
Zealand, like you have
right.
to go on a campaign of like,
And I think, well, right. And I think from like, there's more like you have to have like things written up in your file. Like it's a lengthier process. Whereas here they could just decide they pay you too much and they found someone who they think they can do your job for like half the price. So bye.
yeah,
Yeah, it could, or they just decide they don't like you and they want to shit can you. It doesn't, yeah. So,
yeah. So you have to, there's a lot more nuance and
mhm.
kind of stuff to do it in New Zealand. And then like to the point now where if you get put on a performance improvement plan, you kind of know you're on a ticking clock. Whereas actually they're supposed to be, hey, let's help and coach you through it. But it's actually like, yeah, we're just in 6 months' time, we know where this is gonna go. We just all have to dance around with it. Um, but then they would just tell you it's kind of weird, and I've had this a little bit, and I think I kind of remember Nicola, you telling me a story at work of how some guy at your kindergarten just came up and said something really racist to you because you were another white person. And like the way the my manager would talk to me and like would tell me stories that were bonding, I was like, wow, what the hell do you think about me as a person? Like he would talk about how he's been in meetings where people have cried and he's just sat there going like, you can finish crying now. Like this meeting is continuing. And like he would talk about how like it was like a badge of honor for him that he like knew how to get through these things. And he had like a playbook for how to do it, which is kind of interesting because they tell you that when you start, and then a year later you see that happening to you, and you're like, okay, cool. So this is where we're going. But
here's the playbook on how to fire people and how to manage through people crying in a meeting because you're trying to fire them. Oh, it's happening to me right now. I'm seeing the words as they're. It's like watching.
But it's like, I think I've said this before. It's like people tell you exactly who they are if you listen closely enough. So with one of my previous employers, I remember my first week we were talking about someone who I nabbed as I kind of had a feeling that they were going to be a problem. And my supervisor was like, well, everyone's basically fireable. So don't worry if she doesn't step up, if they don't step up, they can be fired. So of course I was fired. Because when you first go in, you think about it like, well, that's not going to happen to me, right? That's our thought. I feel like we think, well, we're different because we have all this experience or whatever it is we tell ourselves. But if your company is saying so-and-so is expendable, we're all expendable, listen, right? So that's another thing that I think we don't always, and
also been interesting in like a couple of places where I feel like some bosses have all read the same book from the 1980s. Like, so I've had like 3 or 4 places where probably once a quarter there'll be an all teams meeting about how we're having too many meetings and everyone has to like stop having meetings. And then the next quarter you're like, none of you are working well together. And like, can you not see how like, one has led to the other? And I've been in like places where you've got like an executive team and then an extended leadership team, which is just a weird way of saying you're not part of the decision-making process. We just want you to do it. And I always wish for a couple of them, if they were just, I've always said, like, let me know what the rules of the game are and I'll decide if I want to play them or not. Like, don't, because it's fine to say, we don't want you to be strategic. We don't want you to do this. We just want you to execute things. Like, tell people that. Don't tell them that you want them to come up with ideas and be strategic and take ideas forward and then just shit can it like behind their back and stuff. And one place in particular was really weird where like as a member of the LT, our boss went through all our calendars and like, why are you having one-on-ones with like the head of engineering? And I'm like, well, in my role, like he's my counterpart to what we do. And then everything had to be done. You had your 3-on-1s is what I called it, because you had the executive team would come in and meet with every LT member once a week, and they would just tell us what to do. And it would just really depend on where you were in the day of like what you got. So if you're at the end of the day, you probably got a really bad session because they were like annoyed with everyone before you and you got the thing. But if you managed to get in at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, like, you could get your stuff in first and it would like snowball onto someone else.
So has there been anything like so incredibly insane that has happened to you in any of your toxic workplaces that you would like to share?
Insane. Yeah, there's one place where I worked where I got hired, and in my 4-week notice period, I showed up and no one from the leadership team that hired me was there anymore. So during while I wasn't there, a new CEO, a new everything like came in, and
like, did they even know that they hired you?
No. So when I showed up, there was no laptop, no nothing. It was like, but I was in their system, so I could like get myself in the door.
Right.
So I got in and I went to like where my desk was because I'd been shown around by the team like the week before or something. I'd come to like a Friday night drink, so I kind of knew my way in. But I was sitting there for about 2 hours on my first day. Like just no one was
Do you even
here.
know who your manager was? Like, was there any information?
No, there wasn't anything. Like there was and then my team that I was working with had set up my laptop, so they didn't know. So like I was like, working in, but I wasn't in the payroll system, but I had access to like all the code and everything. And it probably took.
Were you just sitting there doing nothing? That's so awkward.
Yeah, I was sitting there. I just kind of joined the team meetings and like, when people walked around, like I think
You're
I
like,
learned
I'll
how
just
to use the
drift this
barista.
way into this conference room, see
Yeah.
what they're chatting about.
So I learned how to use the barista coffee machine, which was really useful.
That is actually,
The
that can
first,
be
You're
quite
just making
useful.
people coffees be like, oh yeah, I'm the new guy.
well, what was really funny is how I met the new head of HR I didn't know how to use the milk frother properly. And so if you don't get it right, it screams really loudly. And she came running out to like tell me that I hadn't
To like
done.
knock it off.
Then she was like, "Who are you?" And that's when she found out I was a new starter. So if I hadn't made that bad cup of coffee, I don't know when I would have like gone through the induction process, or if I'd still be there today, just sitting there following people into random meetings
That's hilarious though. It is
and then
always awkward that first day when you don't know what's going on and like everyone's always so busy with their own work and you're just kind of like, okay, like ready to work, excited, So strange.
the
Yeah.
one after that, I was hired by an American company. So my bosses were in New York.
Hmm.
So I just had a laptop, but I hadn't spoken to anyone. So a laptop just showed up, and you're like, cool. Do I just log in? And because
Is
9
this the
a.m.,
mom?
but 9 a.m. Monday morning is 3 p.m. Eastern Sunday. So like they weren't even working on my first day. So you're just sitting there in your home office going, cool, free laptop and a water bottle, and we'll just see what
So what
happens.
happened? How did you get started with that company? They eventually came online.
Yeah, well, because we had a Wellington office, so
Oh,
the
okay.
their CTO in Wellington, who I'd never met during my process, rang me up like
Got it.
randomly at the clock when they kind of remember. Well, I think when I had three failed login attempts, and then they realized
And
that
they're
I
like, who is this guy? Yeah.
was.
Here's this cat trying to log on with three failed login attempts.
Yeah, and then so when people go, "Why did you only stay for like a year at these places?" It's just like because they didn't know I was working there. I think first,
Like
first of
not getting off to a good start. They didn't even know they hired me. They didn't tell me what my work hours were. Like I showed up and nobody knew where to put me.
I
or
I
got
like
remember
paid, but I'm very confused.
yeah, I remember I showed up to nobody told me this is years ago. Nobody told me that this company that I got hired at didn't work from like 9 to 5. They worked from like 10:30 to like 6:30. It was like a yeah. So I showed up at like 8:45 all early and it was one of those like loft style places in Brooklyn and you could bring your dog to work. So it was me and my little dog and we're sitting outside in this cold loft like there was like not it's like only insulated in the office areas waiting for like and I'm like nobody know and then like the first person who showed up to open the office I was like oh hi I'm the new person and they were just like okay I was like this is awkward it was so bad because like they were like and then finally someone was like we didn't know today was your first day and I was like huh like I have an email. Like nobody knew it was like my first day and it was so weird and bizarre and awkward. So I totally understand that. Yeah.
especially when you're like, "Who's your manager?" and you say their name, like, "Ah, she doesn't work here anymore." So
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Um, Good to know.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly. That's even worse. I remember the manager who hired me didn't show up for like the first week of my work and like didn't tell anyone else that it was my first week. And so people were like scrambling to like onboard me. I get that a lot. Have you had anything like that happen to you, Nicola?
Oh, not really.
No. You're just very memorable.
I'm always pretty memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I yeah, I can't think of a time that's ever happened, even with like big restructures, it's
Lucky you. So, why don't you tell us some of the lessons you learned then, Jay, from your various toxic workplace
yeah, I think
experiences?
the biggest kind of t- tool lesson, what have you, is that I take now is if someone you cared about told you what they were going through, what would your advice to them be? So like I remember my wife like sat me down one day and was just like, this is enough. Because like if I was going through this, you would tell me, get out, but you don't do that for yourself. And it's really weird. And it's good to try and build that self reflection in it. Like, when you're feeling, we all have our tells, right? So mine was, I stay up late and I like game. So once I start seeing I'm going later and later into the evenings, that okay, something's not quite right. So being able to separate yourself from your own situation a little bit and just go, okay, if this was my wife, brother, sister, whoever, would I want them to go through this? And if you would say no to someone else, why would you put yourself through it? Like, why wouldn't you take yourself out of that situation? So that's one big thing. And another one is just people. One of the biggest things I've learned is that successful people aren't necessarily good at their job. They're lucky a lot of the time. And some people are. Like, there's that real Venn diagram of people that are like really successful, but they're really good. And like one of the companies I would name was like the best company I've ever worked for, which was Hazard Co. Like, and I didn't realize how good they were. And then I left, and I'm like, oh, I should have just stayed there. So much.
Sometimes it's the devil, right?
Yeah, and one of my big issues was that I like climbed too quickly. I was too ambitious, and I think if I'm being self-critical, I probably got too senior too quickly, and I hadn't built up the tools to be in that position. And if you think of like what we talked about a bit earlier about whether looking at yourself or whether you were the toxic one or not, like, so I was in really turbulent companies, and it was really easy to climb off the back of other people because they weren't happy. So you could come in and you could do it, and you could,
and it could make it easier because you're like essentially stepping on those that are failing. So it's actually easy to win because you're just like, you guys suck anyway. The minimum work is going to make me look awesome.
Or if I do one of
like,
Nicola's, sorry.
Right. It's like quiet hiring, because it's like if you can just easily do Nicola's job, who's got 5 million things going on, then they'll get rid of Nicola and you'll have a higher, maybe a slight raise, maybe a better, position title or whatever. But you don't really know what you're doing. You just happen to be good at whatever that one thing Nicola wasn't good at, right? So it's like yeah. But then it's like you have to ask yourself the bird's eye view. If you're doing that, other people are going to do that to you.
Well, that was the other thing, is like now being in like team lead positions for a while, is you realize that it's really difficult to still give yourself to people when you've been kind of hurt and backstabbed, whatever word you want to use, and like trying to not let it affect who you are as a person is a really difficult thing for me. And it always has been. So you just go, because people will take everything from you. I know it's harsh to say, but like a lot of your work friends are not actually your friends.
They're not.
At the end of the day, like if it comes down between you and them, you both have mortgages to pay. They're going to
throw you under the bus. Yeah, 100%.
And it took me way longer than I would like to admit to kind of learn that a little bit. But then
I still don't think we've learned it. I don't think, like, even Nicola and I, we talk about toxic workplaces. And if you were to hire me tomorrow, Jay, and be like, oh, she's my friend, I met her on this podcast, she's cool, I would genuinely think that we were friends. And that might, when push comes to shove, like what you just said, if it's your job or my job, you're going to protect yourself. So it's, I don't know if that's a lesson that humans can ever learn unless you're a sociopath. Like, and you have no feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a hard line, because it's like we have a camaraderie with people, and you'd like to think they're your friends, but are they real? It's a tough line to toe, I think.
And I think for me anyway, and I can't speak for anyone else, but when I think back of it, it's like all the people that rallied around me in the past have always been people that reported into me and probably wound me up to go and take the bullets. So like I've been told I have a hero complex. So I'm very easy to, like, you can wind me up and I'll go and fight a million fights And I think some people have used my naivete against me in the past. But what I kind of struggle with at the moment, though, is like, how do you not let that turn you off from helping people?
Yeah. How do you feel it's changed your leadership style now? Do you feel like you've got a more empathetic leadership style, or do you feel like you're more, I don't know, you tell me, where do you think you've landed now?
I think I've developed different leadership styles now, where I think I only had one before. And it's more like I've got a team of 12 now, and I've learned that you can't be the same style for each member of the team. And it's
Mm.
much better earlier on. Avoid the instinct to jump in and solve things, and like learn about the person. So like you've got some people that need cold hard facts and figures, some people need a cuddle, some people need to kick up the ass, and like you can't be everything for everyone.
Mm.
And one thing I do with the team now that I have is if I'm having a bad day, I'll tell them that I'm having a bad day. And if we've got an upcoming one-on-one, I let them opt out of it. Like I'll say, hey, like I'm having a really bad day, blah, blah, blah. I'm really happy to still meet you, but I want it to be your
Mm.
choice. Because I've been in loads of one-on-ones with my managers where they literally sit there for an hour and tell you all their problems. And it gets to like 57 minutes on the clock and they go, anything you want to discuss? And you're like, no, I just want to get out of here. Trying to not do
Like I need
that.
to go take a shower from all the TMI.
Yeah. Or just like, I can't wait to go tell everyone else about this afterwards. Now that I know how to froth a milk properly, I can
Yes.
have a proper
Oh.
conversation.
So,
But
is there any other parting words or advice or anything that when you were thinking of coming on that you really wanted to make sure people heard? Because what, like we touched on earlier, Nicola and I just wanted to have when we started the podcast, we just were like, let's open it up and like have a, like just an open conversation. Because I didn't realize how many people don't talk about this subject, but yet anyone you ask, if you say, hey, have you ever been part of a toxic workplace? I think everyone would say yes at least once, right?
Mm.
my biggest parting advice for anyone would be it's not personal, it just feels like it is. Because like a lot of the time it's really not. Because a lot of the bosses you've had in the past that you think hated you or whatever, like they don't think about you
No, or
anymore.
they have like, or they have their own like work trauma that has shaped them to be the kind of boss or leader that they are, which is still not personal because that's their own stuff that they have to figure out. We're just like all wounded humans walking around trying to pretend like we know what we're doing. And none of us
Yeah,
do. And I feel like if we just all like leveled with each other and I was like, hey, I'm good at what I do, but sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, but I still figure it out. Like, we're cool. I feel like most people would be like, all right, I get that. Same. They'd probably be like, same.
yeah, and I think one of the other big lessons I learned was that like two things can be true at the same time, right? That it can
Mm.
be a bad place for me to work, but it can be a good place for you to work. And
Hmm.
some of the mistakes I've probably made more junior in my career were like trying to recruit people to how bad it was to
Yeah.
work. And then that feedback gets back up to the boss. So like don't your experience won't be the same as someone else's. So try and understand where they're coming from. And some people don't care about a bullying culture because they know how to work within that
Hmm.
remit. And like they're like, this job works for me. I know how to work with my boss.
And that's
They
fine. They can have that. It's like, good for you. Keep going on with your bad self. But for me, I gotta go.
yeah, I got to get out of this because it's not worth it. And then if you
Yeah,
feel like it's not worth it, it's probably not worth it.
it's
Get it.
not. Or if it's affecting like your mental health or your physical health or your sleep, I think that's also a really big like self-reflection box that you can tick. Like, okay, is my job consistently affecting my sleep, consistently affecting my mood? These are things I've learned. Has my physical health gone down? or up since I started the job? Like, did I gain weight? Did I lose weight? Am I having more physical ailments? Do I feel good? Whatever. I think it's just, take a few minutes to check in with yourself. And another thing that you touched on, Jay, was how when you get to have a certain amount of experience, it's tougher for you because people will hire you thinking that you might be the great elixir for the problem, but do they really want that?
Yeah.
And usually the answer is no.
Yeah, I don't want a yes man unless you disagree with me, then I definitely want that yes man to come back. Has kind of been my experience, which is really weird.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I just want the expert to come in and tell me we're doing everything right, and then you can go. But if you disagree with me based on your experience, we don't like you because you're whatever, arrogant, whatever, insert adjective here, and you can hurry along, hop away.
yeah, and then just don't chase the money. That's what I've done. And I know it's easy to say after the fact and it's hard to turn it down, but if someone's paying above market rate, there's probably a reason.
There's a reason. Yeah.
There's a real reason for it. And
Yeah.
I remember when I was leaving one of the other places, the offer I got was like X thousands of dollars less. And when you work it out after tax and per week, it's like, would you pay $60 a week not to be this stressed? Because once you get over, say, 120K, everything you get on top of that doesn't make a huge difference in your.
And that's also a whole different other topic that I just want to barf about because you're right. It's like you could be making a decent amount, like a decent six figures, and unless it's like from like 150, I want to say here in America to like 300, it doesn't make that much difference. But then once you're over that 300, that's when you feel the difference. It's like a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, going back to what you were saying, like would you pay $60 every week or every day to not feel like this? And what do you think?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, now
The answer is yes, right? It's like, fuck yeah, I'd pay $60 to not feel like a piece of shit and like shit on all day at work. I would. I
But like
absolutely
I've gone from my daughter asking me not to go to work to dropping her off at school 3 days a week. Just that
right.
whole
Yeah.
thing.
Granted,
Like,
though, we do have a very family-friendly work environment.
we do.
You guys do now, right?
Yeah.
It's actually you just reminded me of like one of the biggest red flags that I would look for in any interview process now was the promise of a promotion to come. So you see it a lot in like product roles of like come in as the senior product manager and then within a year we'll promote you to head of or CPO or whatever it is. And then you just spend 3 years chasing that brass ring that was never going to be there. Because if they want you to grow into that role, why wouldn't they have you?
Why wouldn't they just hire you for that?
Yeah.
Or like
Especially
had
if
a
someone
like
in
roadmap, right? Like if
Yeah.
you hit X, Y, and Z by 6 months, then you get this, right? If they really, that's what I always say. If someone really wants to do something, they'll do it,
Yeah.
right? So it's very similar in that situation too.
And without trying
Nicola.
to more privilegey again, is like be very wary of ESOPs or like share programs because usually they have a 1, 2, 3 year cliff. And what I used to think was like, oh, cool. So if I stay here, I'll get this. But sometimes it actually puts a countdown clock on your employment.
Can you, before you go on, maybe not everyone knows what ESOP is. I don't know if it's very prevalent anymore here in America. So do you want to just give us a little, it was like back in the day, like when my dad was working, and it's more prevalent in like Fortune 500 companies, but a lot of startups, I don't know if they do it anymore. So do you mind just giving a brief overview so for people who don't know?
It's a big thing kind of in New Zealand and Australia because it's a way of like not giving you 150K salary. They'll give you 100K salary and 50,000, say, ESOP. So ESOP is like employee share of profits. It can be different things. Like it's like a shared scheme where they go. We'll
So how
set
does that
aside.
equate? How does that equate to money, or is it just stocks in the company?
So it would be stocks that are valued at $160.
Okay. Yep.
Right? But what you don't realize is like they're not actually your shares. They're set
Right.
aside for you, and you can buy them at that price, or at a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year cliff will give you X amount of shares, right? So you
Right.
think your total package is worth 250,000, let's say. But you actually would never see any of that until they sell the company or until you actually buy into it. But it sounds great. It's a bit like the bonus, right? Like I would prefer to take, if you were to give me a 100K salary and 50K bonus, I'd prefer to take 120 salary and just forget about the
Right.
bonus. Because like at the end of the year, someone else can just decide, the company didn't meet performance targets or your team didn't meet performance targets, so you don't get your.
Right. So it's subject to something that is not necessarily a metric, right? And I
Yeah.
also think with ESOP, you have to be proactive about it, right? Like if you want to buy the shares, you have to do it, and or like, right. So you don't actually get the money from it. You own part of the company and then you have to like invest it on the stock market. So it's like an extra job in a lot of ways for you. And like for me, I had an ESOP at one point. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even pay attention.
Yeah, I think it's that interesting thing of, because also then as you learn more and more, companies can just dilute shares if they want to.
Right.
We
So
can,
it's basically like a really shitty workaround.
yeah, it's like we can give you 300 shares, but at the next AGM, we're going to release 300,000 shares more of that.
And
We
yours are
all
going to be worth a
ourselves,
penny.
yeah,
Right.
but you
And
can
you
get a penny.
literally, it's worth a penny. So fuck you.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's all that kind of sleight of hand magic, right? Look over here, look over here, look over here. Like
And I
we're going
think
to
a
promote
lot of,
you.
yeah, I mean, to me, it just sounds like a Ponzi scheme. It's like a scam. It's
Yeah,
like, oh, we'll give you stocks, but guess what? They don't really mean anything. So you're really only getting paid 90,000 a year, even though it says compensation's 150. Yeah.
and there's a big thing. I'm not sure exactly what it's like with the 401k, but like in New Zealand, we have like our Kiwi Saver, which is our pension scheme, retirement scheme. So
Hmm.
like all employees will give you 3% of your salary. So if you take less of a base salary, you're getting less contributions. So like
Hmm.
the bonuses and ESOPs won't be factored into, and I think a lot
Right.
of,
So you're getting like 3% of like $20,000 a year, which
yeah,
is like garbage. It's when by the time like you or I are ready to retire in like, 15 years or so, like that's going to be worth, you could probably buy a gallon of milk with that.
but even if you were like, we've got a 3-year vesting cliff for ESOP.
Hmm.
Our average tenure is 1.8 years. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously a
It doesn't
tool.
mean anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I know. And like here in America, nobody gets a pension.
Yeah, it's
There
kind of
is something
interesting
nice.
thinking about it as well. Like if you think of working earlier in our careers where like Slack is great, but Slack also doesn't let you switch off.
Oh no, I won't use Slack. I'm like an old school. People probably think I'm a dinosaur. I'm like, if you need me, email me or text me. I don't care.
Yeah, and I kind of miss, one of the few things I miss about being an electrician is like when you left site, you were
You
done.
left. You're done.
There's no,
Yeah,
like you don't bring cables home with you and make them up at
yeah, and
home.
you're like, oh, let me strip these wires at home.
Yeah.
It's like I'll do it tomorrow. Yeah. Um, and that's the one thing I don't like about working from home. Even though I have a dedicated room in my house that is just my office, I don't like being able, like I don't not like being able to like go to a dedicated workspace outside of my home. Um, I would prefer to still be in office, to be honest. But that's just not. And now that everyone's after COVID, now everyone's remote. We gave up our office space in New York. So it's just like it's not viable right now, but I liked it. For me, it worked.
Yeah, I need a mix. Like I need to talk to adults face to face. Like I need that body language and I need that. It's a bit
Yeah.
like with the team leadership question. Like body language is so important.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I got hired where Nicola and I met. I got hired there for a consultancy, and um, like it was all remote. So, and it was very heavily Slack. So I would say something like to one of my direct reports, I'd be like, "Oh my God, you're killing me." But but if on Slack it sounds like I'm being a dick. But
Yeah.
if I were to just say to you like, Jay, oh my God, you're killing me, you would know I was just joking, like it was something said in jest, like I didn't mean it.
But
You
it's also
know,
what I say to my team now is like, if you tell me you're fine, I have to take you out. You
right.
were, if we're in person together, I can see that you're not
If you're not fine.
being yourself or
Right.
you acted differently. Like
Right. And I
staring
just
at
think
this little green dot
right.
makes sure I'm fine. Like,
I just think it really does people and humans a disservice because there's a lot you're missing. Like even not just tone, but like, yeah, you can pick up on nonverbal cues and um it's just I feel like it does everyone a disservice, like not being in person, like even if it's just like being in person once a month, like getting to know people um and their weirdness. So what else could I say? Like how everyone operates, but it's like what you said um about like you can't be the same leader for everyone because some people need like a shoulder to cry on, some people need a kick in the ass, some people need literally to be told what to do, and then other people you need to push back and have them figure it out on their own.
well, I'm a bit so usually I'm a huge American football fan. So
Oh,
usually
are you?
yeah, so my aunt used to live in New York, so I used to go back and forth over
Where in
there.
New York did she live?
She lived in Manhattan because she worked as a events manager for some seemed
Cool,
like a
cool.
really impressive thing when I was younger. It probably was like for her. It
Well,
was just
because I'm from Manhattan, but I was born in the Bronx, and there's a little pocket of the Bronx that is very Irish, like off the boat Irish, and it's called Woodlawn. And I was wondering if maybe she had lived there because it's highly Irish.
no, she didn't live there because
She
she
didn't live in
wanted
the Bronx. She wanted to get
Manhattan
away. Yeah.
dream. But I've always
Sorry.
been really drawn to Buffalo
Oh,
because
wait,
like
like the actual location or the sports team?
well the sports team
For
and
the
the people
animals.
like well the animals too, but like the people. So if you think like my grandmother was a huge pro wrestling and meatloaf fan, so that's like what I grew up with. So if you see, and it was really one of the most fun things about visiting New York was just like winding people up that Buffalo, the Bills were technically the only New York team. The other two teams were New Jersey teams, and like you could just
Well,
get
the Jets, well, it's stupid. They're New York Jets, New York Giants, but they play in Jersey. Their stadium's in Jersey. I mean, I think at this point we should just like rename it like Long Island, New Jersey. Because it's like Long Island, New York, and New Jersey are like kind of all fused, but they're not. But I don't know. It's weird. But Buffalo,
All
the
I know
place.
about Long Island is there's iced teas.
Oh, yes. And do you know anything about the Long Island medium?
no.
Okay, that's
Is
a
it an
reality show.
medium iced tea?
No, she's this crazy lady, and her name's Teresa Caputo, and she's from Long Island, and she's a medium, and she could tell you that she sees dead people, and she could talk to you people that passed, and she has crazy nails and big blonde hair, and she wears really crazy clothes, and she talks just like this.
I love her already.
I
Is she
know.
my auntie?
There's this really amazing scene where she goes in to buy a refrigerator or a washing machine, and she's wearing a gray sweatsuit, like gray top, gray bottom, with crazy Christian Louboutin heels, and her hair is like a big helmet. Anyway, look it up. You'll enjoy it.
Anyway,
Right, just for your pleasure, I'm adding this right here into our
is
little
this a
chat.
picture of her?
Just click on the link.
I'm clicking on the link. I shouldn't
Just
click on the link.
because just look at the picture that comes up.
Oh Jesus, yeah.
That is Teresa Caputo. She's the Long Island medium. If you go to
She's
this
got
is
a fan
like
club. Is it like an OnlyFans club?
no. She is like the spirits talk to me. You guys, it's insane, and you should watch it
Her
because
hair.
it's
Her hair.
is amazing. Like it's so bad that it's good. Do you know what I mean?
You know who
Gwen
similar
Shamlin.
style?
Yes, I know. But Teresa Caputo brings it. Let me just tell you.
Do her
She
voice
brings
again
it.
one more time because we loved it.
This is what you call Long Island Italian. And I know because my mom is Long Island Italian.
Are
And
they
I grew up
sisters?
around no. Teresa Caputo. No, but Teresa Caputo and her husband was Larry, and Larry went to LA and cheated on her. So now they're done.
Oh,
They're
my
done.
goodness me.
Yeah, they're done. Anyway, we digress.
Anyway,
This
where did
should
we
not
get
go
to?
on the
Because,
podcast
sorry.
though, Nicola, because we keep getting yelled at for digressing too much. Mainly me. I get yelled at on our comments.
I will edit this out so we stop being yelled at.
But seriously, Teresa
That's
Caputo
no
is a
fun.
gem.
You know what? I know this is hilarious. And you know what? It's not that you're being yelled at. It's just that people don't appreciate or are inclusive of your diverse thinking.
We could go with that. I do tend to digress. I am self-reflective. The reviews are typically not wrong. But I think, we're not podcasters. We're figuring this out as we go. Like, give us a little slack. But can we just quickly talk about, Nicola, how someone gave us a 1-star review and just bounced? Our only 1-star review. Someone just gave us a 1-star review, and I was like looking to see if there was any, like, how you could rate it at the bottom and kind of like explain why you rated it that number. Nothing. I was like, that is so fucking savage. Good for them. Like 1 star, and just they were like, hated it.
Bounce. It could have been a finger slip.
Probably not. Probably not, because I went back and listened to some of ours, and there's been some episodes that I'm like, this blows. I can't get through this, and I sat through it. So, it is what it is. Like, we're figuring it out.
Well, I can give you cause for hope. I've had customers before that have given us a 1-star review because they thought 1 was good. So I've had like reviews of apps I've worked on where like, this is the best product I've ever had.
1 star.
Well, 1 star.
You know what? Number one at the top.
Okay. All right. I still think they were like unlistenable. 1 bounce.
But at least they cared enough to do that. I just bounced. So you've made a decision.
Yeah, I would just be like, this isn't for me, bounce. Like, I even like the podcasts that I listen to religiously and love, I don't even review them. I don't even give them any stars, which is probably fucked up since I'm now a podcaster. I should probably go back and at least give them stars. I don't have to write anything, but
in recognition though of Jay being with us today, I did just have a look at our podcast chart rankings, and we are ranking currently number 60 in Ireland.
Wow.
Yeah. So
out of how many? 60? All right. Well, okay. Back on topic, even though I feel like we should keep in the 1-star review conversation.
Fine, we can keep it in.
Because like I kind of like that person. Savage.
I feel that's a brave and bold move.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I kind of respect them for just being that savage. Like, fuck you, bitches. 1 star out.
Well, your whole podcast is about speaking your truth, right? So
right. So that's what I'm saying. I praise. I'm here for it. Maybe I should start leaving 1-star reviews. Like, one of my favorite phrases is "no is a complete sentence," and that's the equivalent of "no is a complete sentence" when it comes to rating something. 1 star out. Love it.
All right,
Nicola, come back because we're gonna sign off now. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Any parting words? Yeah. Nicola knows where to find you, so we'll put all that stuff up. Right?
Well, she sits beside me at work, so she can definitely know where to find me.
So. Well, it was lovely having you. Thank you, Jay. We really appreciate it. Yes. And hopefully by next week, our episode should be live.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, team.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a good one.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories. If you enjoyed our candid conversations and insights, don't forget to hit that like button, follow us on social media, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.